Fox News brought on a Democratic Congressman, Ro Khanna, and gave him an opportunity to discuss the economic record of Joe Biden, the policies of Joe Biden, and it was very interesting to see. Always fascinating when Democrats have a chance to appear on Fox News, and not these weird fake Democrats who are really just right-wingers like what Tulsi Gabbard used to be before she announced she was a Democrat, but a real Democrat who actually does want to see Joe Biden reelected. Yes, because democracy's on the line, but also because there's a record to speak of. And there's also a vision for what's ahead to speak of. And I always think that the Fox hosts must regret these sorts of encounters because they do so much work to misinform the audience of Fox News on these subjects. And it just takes a couple minutes for someone like Ro Khanna to dismantle a lot of the house of cards of dishonesty that has been built up on Fox News. So here it is, Ro Khanna on with Shannon Bream.
New data showing that when people are asked, are you better off financially than you were 4 years ago? A majority, 52% say they are worse off. 26% say about the same. But only 1 in 5 think they're better off now than they were under President Trump. That includes 86% of independents who report that they think the economy is negative, and you need them to win in the fall.
Well, look, this country went through COVID, and I think that had a huge, huge impact, and we're still recovering from it. But the question is, what is the choice? Here's what President Biden wants to do. He's created 15 million new jobs. He wants to bring back manufacturing. He wants to raise wages for folks. He wants to lower the cost of prescription drugs.
I'm going to really quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button plus the like button as well and the alert bell so you get notifications. Back to it.
President Trump had 4 years. What did he do? He had corporate tax cuts. Many people benefited from it in Silicon Valley, in my district. And the question is, where do you think the economic vision of this country should go? I believe invest in the working and middle class. There's no doubt people are hurting because we're still recovering from COVID, but President Biden has a better economic vision.
Well, why do the polls say the opposite? Why do more people give the edge to former President Trump, say they were doing better under him and they prefer him to handle things like the economy and inflation?
I think many people think 4 years ago was prior to COVID, and COVID really hurt folks. I mean, we had a huge increase in unemployment. We had a lot of supply chains get interrupted, but President Biden has steered us out of that low point, and he has done it by investing in infrastructure, by creating 15 million new jobs, lowering prescription drug costs, building infrastructure. And the point, though, is elections are about the future. I mean, what is President Trump's economic agenda? As I understand it, it is massive tax cuts for the very wealthy. President Biden's economic agenda is a raise for the working class. And I think people will see that President Biden's policies will be better.
So clearly facts on the side of Ro Khanna there, and a lot to walk through. I'll get to another clip in just a second that is relevant to this. But I will say there's something that aggravates me when Fox News cites public opinion about issues that they spend all day long, every day, misinforming people on. And so, as I said in the segment just recently about crime, discussing the successes of the Biden administration and of Democrats over the last few years on the economy, on crime, and overseeing this huge economic recovery, overseeing this massive plummet in crime, those aren't to say that your pain economically or your pain within the context of crime, that those things aren't real. They are. It's to say that we want things to go in the right direction, get better, and the good choice for that end is Joe Biden. Trump would be worse for those issues, is the point that we're making. And so what Fox News does is tap into real pain that people have, but then through lies and distortion of facts, bends those real feelings in the direction of convincing people that Biden is causing them instead of actually addressing them, which in many cases is what his record shows him to be doing. And Ro Khanna made a really important point there, which is, yeah, of course, people sort of in a general sense feel like, under Trump pre-COVID, I remember that being better than right now. Well, because this global crisis that none of us have experienced in our lifetimes happened since then. So yeah. Now, the 4 years ago thing is ridiculous, as we've been talking about, because 4 years ago we were in the middle of it, in the middle of this pandemic crisis. So pretending like you're worse off now than when we were in the middle of the pandemic, as Republicans have been saying, is a little ridiculous. But I think people say that and mean pre-pandemic 4 years ago. That's sort of what they're referring to. And that has way more to do with pre-global crisis and post-global crisis than Trump and Biden, right? And we talked about this Atlantic piece that's titled, "It's Not the Economy, It's the Pandemic." Two psychologists who wrote it, and the subheading here is "Joe Biden is paying the price for America's unprocessed COVID grief." And let me just remind you of a couple of the excerpts we read previously. Experts have struggled to find a convincing explanation for this era of bad feelings in the United States. And the context is that the economic metrics are all starting to look really good, but people often are still, as you saw in this Fox News poll, citing bad feelings about the economic situation. Maybe it's the spate of inflation over the past couple of years, the immigration crisis at the border, or the brutal wars in Ukraine and Gaza. But even the people who claim to make sense of the political world acknowledge that these rational factors can't fully account for America's national malaise. We believe that's because they're overlooking a crucial factor. And it goes on to emphasize it's the pandemic. We all want so badly to just have that behind us, understandably, that we're then omitting it from our memory, in a sense, and judging Biden as if he took over in 2019 and judging Trump as if he ended his presidency in 2019. And I'll go through once again the reason why Republicans push that so hard and pretend like 4 years ago was not in the middle of the pandemic. And instead of saying it exactly the way I've said it so many times recently, I'll just remind you in a general sense that Trump's record is of a president coming into office as economic trends were poised to continue in a strong direction. That's what was projected as Obama left office. Things were just sort of chugging along, and things just sort of chugged along. He didn't completely mess it up for 3 years. Good job economically, but didn't cause some wonderful change from the trends in a positive direction. And then this moment of crisis took place. That's when the leadership of a president is supposed to be exhibited, and he failed on all fronts. Didn't cause the pandemic, but mishandled it, divided the country. And during this public health, social, and economic crisis, we looked to a president who failed, and who exhibited this dereliction of duty, and who cared more about minimizing his own political harm than minimizing the pain of Americans. And that's what Republicans just really want you to forget about, because then Trump's record is someone who took over a strong economy and didn't do anything remarkable except for cut taxes that disproportionately benefit the top of the economic ladder, meanwhile dividing the country. Then the crisis hits, he mishandles it, economic disaster, and hands a country in shambles to Joe Biden. And so then Joe Biden takes over, and we see a recovery, and we see a president who cares less about his political advantage and more about actually trying to get the country back on track. And within 3 short years, the economy is doing pretty good, with still things we want to address. Crime has dropped super significantly, violent crime near 50-year lows, and a list of legislative victories for Joe Biden, as Ro Khanna mentioned, lowering prescription drug costs, investing in American manufacturing, investing in green energy, creating jobs, all the while expanding healthcare for veterans, expanding the ACA, investing in infrastructure, the largest investment infrastructure since the Eisenhower Highway Program. And that story, the one that's just based on accurate analysis, taking into consideration this massive crisis that we all experience, is one that would lead every logical American to vote for Joe Biden against Donald Trump. And so then Fox News has to tell a very different story, not based on the facts. I'll read a little bit more from this Atlantic piece, then play another clip. Our remedy is for leaders to encourage remembrance while providing accurate and trustworthy information about both the past and the present. Did I say president? Present. In the early days of the pandemic, President Donald Trump mishandled the crisis and peddled misinformation about COVID. But with 2020 a traumatic blur, Trump seems to have become the beneficiary of our collective amnesia, and Biden the repository for our lingering emotional discontent. And that's what it is. You can't blame people for not bouncing back and being just as good as we were before this world-rocking nightmare over 1 million Americans died. The economy collapsed. There was so much social unrest. And that was horrific. And people were scarred by that. And so, of course, we're not going to just bounce back from that in the way we feel about our economic situation, our social situation, the country at large, all of it. It makes sense. But just as this article says, the remedy for this misperception about the current state of things is just reminding people of that fact. Remember what it felt like 4 years ago. Having a president who was just failing. And that will allow people, I think, to more accurately judge the presidency of Joe Biden, as Ro Khanna was pointing out. Here is Pete Buttigieg making a similar point weeks ago.
Republican response came from Senator Katie Britt of Alabama. Let's take a look.
The free world deserves better than a dithering and diminished leader. Just ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago?
You know, a majority of America are saying the answer to that is no. That's the classic Ronald Reagan question.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, you couldn't get toilet paper. 3 or 4 years ago, we were in the middle of a pandemic that killed about 1 million people. When we took office, just to take a couple examples from the transportation sector, there had been 4 straight years of promises about an infrastructure bill that never came. Of course, President Biden delivered that in his first year, and it's contributing to manufacturing jobs and construction jobs around the country. Aviation, right now, one of our biggest challenges is making sure airlines can keep up with the demand. 3 years ago, the big question was whether America's airlines were going to go out of business because of the condition that the economy was in when President Biden inherited it. Now, I know those response addresses have to be written before the State of the Union is actually delivered, and I don't think they usually change them based on what actually happens during the address, but anybody who watched that address saw, not just in the substance, but in the delivery of President Biden's remarks, a leader who is in command, showing strength and clarity of vision.
And so the reason, by the way, I'll say again, that we're harping on this so much, or I'm pounding the drum so dang consistently on this issue, is because I need people to understand the facts as they are, how Biden's contributing to those facts, and then vote accordingly so that hopefully he can win and Democrats could get a majority in the House and Senate, and we can keep advocating for things that I think make your life better too, even the haters, okay? As I said in a past segment, despise me all you like. And my goodness, do some people express that disgust across social media for yours truly. But regardless, the policies that I care so much about, and thus the elected leaders that I want to see elected who will implement those policies, it's to make your life better as well. And so get ready for that, because it's coming. We're going to win, and we're going to fight for you as well. Make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel.